You mentioned Mao, and I mean, it's hard to talk about China without looking at kind of Mao's shadow over modern Chinese history. Mao was incredibly autocratic as well, but and authoritarian. But it seems like for two very different ends than what we see in China now. I mean, how's that evolution taking place? I mean, where do you still see a direct connection between, the revolution under Mao and his government to what we see in China now, or is this kind of a completely new, evolved government?
No, I think there's still a connection. I mean, the what the communists would call the external situation is very different. The world is very different. But I think, for Mao, communism was one part of a quest to restore the greatness of the Chinese nation. And I think Xi very much has that same, explicitly has the same goal. And I think the other thing that is continuous is this Leninist political system, where control is supreme, and where democracy and liberal values are seen as a tool of a hostile class, whether they be one's own bourgeoisie or one's own, exploitative upper classes, or the evil American imperialists. That liberal values are, anathema to a party that is wise enough to lead the people for the betterment of the people. So I think those things are very much in common. I mean, what's obviously very different is that there is a functioning market economy. It's a very different market economy from the United States and Western Europe, but there is a market. The state plays an enormous role in it, though.
Yeah, it is. I mean, the economic system that China's developed just seems so far removed from Marxism in so many ways. I mean, you have billionaires. You have Chinese billionaires. You have some of the largest privately held firms in the world out of China, and I mean, you see these abuses that are no different. I mean, we what was this? Was it which technology company where it was like the CEO or the CFO was just outed as a pedophile in China recently, and has kind of been trying to hide behind a cloud of money that's very reminiscent of Jeffrey Epstein. And so it is interesting, I think, especially when you get into the kind of modern
exploited working class. I mean, that's true, which is why I tend to think of Lenin as being more important in understanding the Chinese Communist Party than Marx, because their aim doesn't, Xi Jinping talks about poverty alleviation a lot, and there certainly is a very real attempt to lift everyone in the country out of poverty. But it's no longer a party that seeks to destroy the rich, but it uses Leninist tools of control to ensure that it still controls the party. So I would say, they're heirs to Lenin rather than Marx.
It is an interesting thing. I mean, and I think that's kind of one of the big, almost arguments that you get in Western society is it fair to truly call China communist at this point? I mean, they obviously still refer to it as the Communist Party, but is that truly a fair interpretation, do you think?
I think if you think of communism as a situation where wealth is equally distributed, clearly that's not. But if you think of communism as a bunch of tools that you use to control society and end up with certain, to achieve certain ends, I think it still works as a term.
It's, I mean, that's an interesting point. I feel like almost unto itself, because it's more communism as Ronald Reagan would refer to it than communism as I think a lot of early communist writers, for example, would have referred to it. I think the goals are drastically different, and the way that it looks is very different.
I think that's right. And I mean, you do see, last year there were, and the year before, a number of Marxist student associations in China, which were going down to factories, mostly in the south of China, where most of the factories are, and they're acting as labor activists, and they were all arrested or intimidated into silence. So yeah, I think that's a fair point.
It to me, it seems like an important distinction almost that gets missed, and I think in Western understanding of them, because it's very easy to soundbite down. I think especially post Cold War to soundbite down and say, oh, like communism bad, but it leaves out very fundamental understandings of like political ideology, I think, for the average media consumer. And I think that can be very dangerous as you start to talk about different economic models, different systems of welfare and distribution, and then also, I think really understanding the motivations of China,